Good day everyone, I'm back again with another tutorial video, and this tutorial video is based on a request from Kid Chris, and he's been disturbing me. He wants me to teach him how to make your animations pop and not look flat. So without further ado, let me teach you the tricks to improving your animation and taking your animation to the next level. In order to add depth to your animation, there are three things you need to take into account. The first one is your lines, the second one is your shadows, and the third one is your blends. There's an extra one called the highlight, but this varies depending on the scene. You might choose to add it when the scene requires it, and you might choose to ignore it when it's not necessary. Now, when you want to draw your lines, let's consider a circle. A circle can be flat, and a circle can be viewed as spherical. Now look at this circle that I just made. Some of you might say it's a flat circle, but a case can also be made that it's a spherical circle. Now depending on the way you draw it, observe how the second circle looks like. The second circle clearly looks flat because it's not well rounded and it's not a familiar shape that people are conversant with. So the illusion of it being spherical is broken upon the viewer. Before you are two examples, one on the right and one on the left. Which of these looks flat and which of these has depth? I think it's clear to everyone that the one on the right is the flat one and the one on the left has depth. And if you chose otherwise, then I don't know what's wrong with you. Something must be wrong with your eyes. Now, why is this the case? The reason why the one on the left looks like as if it has depth is because despite it being drawn on a flat surface, I'm taking things like the crease on the cloth into account. I'm taking the space that exists within the sleeves of the shirt, and even in the fingers you can see the depth as the fist is rolled up. That means the way it is drawn presents that depth even before anything else is added. So anytime you're animating and you want your animations not to look flat, look at the outlines very well and make sure it appears solid and has depth before you even apply any other thing. Now, let us consider the shadows. Look at these two images. Which of them gives depth and which of them looks flat? Now, this is a tricky one because I made it on purpose. If you chose A, then you'll be wrong. The right shadow that has the depth is B, while A looks flat. And the reason is because it factors the outline into account and the way the light source interacts with it. For instance, look below the fingertips of the fist that is being balled up. It is blocking the light rays and it is casting shadows on the palm. The same thing is applicable to the shirt area. It's showing that the shirt is being pushed out and the belly is looking flat. It also takes the crease of the elbows into account. Now look at A. A looks perfectly flat. It's not obeying the clothes, the depth on the clothes or anything. It's just like as if you are painting over a cardboard box or a cardboard cutout of a fist. So this is how shadows play a role. Whenever you are drawing shadows, just the same way you are taking the depth of your outline into consideration. Take the depth of your shadow into consideration. Now look at this adjustment. A looks well done now that the shadow has taken the outline into consideration and the depth and the light source. Now, the third thing you want to apply to make your animation look less flat is your blend. And this blend can be applied to both the color and the shadows. For the shadows, the reason why you want to blend it is to give the impression that the closer the object is to the light source, the less visible the shadow is. To achieve the desired effect, the first thing you want to do is to select your eraser. Increase the size to the maximum level, increase the fade to the maximum level, and reduce the alpha opacity to around 30 or lesser. Then you want to use your eraser to erase your shadows little by little. The closer your shadow is to the light source, the more you erase, and the farther it is away from the light source, the less you erase. As a matter of fact, there are some parts you will not even erase at all to achieve this blend. Now let me just label it. The lighter zone is closer to the light source, while the darker zone is farthest away from the light source. Learning how and when to apply your shadow requires a lot of study and a lot of practice. It's not something I'll be going into, and there are a lot of tutorial videos out there that will guide you on this process. But the general rule of thumb is that wherever your light source is, your shadow is in the opposite direction. If your light source is coming from the top, your shadows should be down. If it's coming from left, your shadows should be right. If there is anything that is blocking your shadow, that is blocking your light source, then you should have a shadow behind it. The next stage of making sure your animation doesn't look flat is applying blends to your colors. Now, the way you apply blends to your colors is quite different from the way you blend your shadows. For these, you want to create a different layer. Then in that newly created layer, you would apply or draw a circle of the color you want to use to blend your flat colors. That is the initial color you have selected for your character. In my case, it is red and some form of gray or dark brown. Now, the color I want to use to blend it would be like a very light shade of red or very light shade of pink. After selecting the color you want to use to blend, you erase that selected color with your eraser the same way you erased your shadows earlier. Now that the blend is selected, you select that circle, you increase the size, and then you move it towards the area in which you want the color to be blended in. If you don't want your blended circle to move out of the initial colors you've made, which are your flat colors, click on the side button of the layer in which your blended circle is and click on Clip Masking. That way, your color does not spill out of the flat colors that are below. All your blends are now within the circle. The reason why you want your blended circle to be on a different layer is because you want to use the features of the blending mode. While you can also blend within the same layers of your flat colors, if you do so, all blending mode will apply to all the colors. But if your blended circle was done on a different layer, it means that you can blend it separately from the flat colors you've selected. Now that you've done this, you can now go ahead and experiment with the blending mode. For me, my favorite blending modes are color burn and overlay, but there are cases when I also use other blending modes depending on the scene and how it fits into it. So that concludes the 3 things you need to factor into your animation when you want it to look less flat and you want it to pop out. Study your shadows, study your lines, and study your color blends, and you're going to achieve this great effect. Now, I told you there's a final thing to consider, and that is your highlight. To create your highlight, create a new layer, label it. I'm not going to label it in this case. And then select a color in which you want to use to apply your highlight. But because this is a white background, I'm going to use a white highlight. Usually if it's a blue scene, you can use a light blue highlight. If it's a green scene, you can use a light green highlight. So usually just look at the overall theme of your background and use that to select your highlight. And just like in the case of applying your blending mode, make sure that the layer is set to clip the layer below it. That way, when you're applying your highlights on your flat colors, it doesn't spill outside the flat colors that you made initially. Now look at what the highlights did. It's a minor adjustment, but it made your character stand out. You can go further, add glows to your highlights, experiment with blending modes, and see what it looks like. Just make sure that whenever you're applying your highlights, don't apply your highlights over your shadows, and usually just apply it at the particular angle in which the light source is coming from. I hope this helps you, Kid Chris, and those of you that are also interested in learning about blending modes. You can experiment, you can take it further, and you can also look up to the source of creativity himself, which is God. So observe nature, look at the works that God has created, incorporate it into your animation. That's what I do, and take it to the next level. So God bless you.